The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Matthew. When the Magi had departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream and said, "Rise, take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt, and stay there until I tell you. Herod is going to search for the child to destroy him." Joseph rose and took the child and his mother by night and departed for Egypt. He stayed there until the death of Herod, that what the Lord had said through the prophet might be fulfilled, "Out of Egypt I called my son." When Herod had died, behold, the angel of the Lord appeared in a dream to Joseph in Egypt and said, "Rise, take the child and his mother, go to the land of Israel, for those who sought the child's life are dead." He rose, took the child and his mother, went to the land of Israel. But when he heard that Archelaus was ruling over Judea in the place of his father Herod, he was afraid to go back there. Because he had been warned in a dream, he departed for the region of Galilee. He went and dwelt in a town called Nazareth, so that what had been spoken through the prophets might be fulfilled, "He shall be called a Nazarene." The Gospel of the Lord. Margaret Mead. Margaret Mead was a very famous anthropologist who died in 1978. She came to Portland one time about 10 years before her death, and I had the privilege of listening to her lecture on the summary of her life's work as an archaeologist. She had studied many different kinds of civilizations. She had spent a long time in the South Seas, looking at primitive cultures as well as complicated cultures. And she said that there was one thing that all of those cultures had in common, with no exception. One thing. They had the institution of family. Family. And in all of those cultures, what the institution of family had in common was, first, raise the children. It gave a safe environment in which to raise children. Second, inheritance, passing on the resources and goods from one generation to the next. Those were the two common factors of family in all of the places that she studied. The family is, for us, a core concept. We call the family, the nuclear family, a building blocks of society, because each one of those little families fit together and form community. And it's important those families are able to function and have what they need in order to get along, in order to raise the children and to live in peace and harmony. We celebrate today the Feast of the Holy Family, Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. And we give some thought to how they were. What would they have been like? Mary and Joseph went to Bethlehem, and Mary had Jesus, gave birth to him in a stable. They had become a family in a true sense of the word. And so here we have Joseph with his wife and little baby. And one night he gets visited by an angel, as we heard in the gospel. He says, "Now take your family, Mary and Jesus, and get out of town. Now, in the middle of the night, leave now." And so Joseph did. Packed up Mary and Jesus and whatever they had, and headed out into the darkness for Egypt, because the angel had warned them that King Herod was coming to kill the child. In those days, if you were in trouble with the authorities in Israel, people commonly went to Egypt. Egypt was under the governance of the Romans, and therefore the kings in Israel had no power there. You were safe there. And that's why Joseph went with Mary and Jesus to Egypt. And so they stayed there for a time until King Herod died. He died in 4 BC, according to our calendar. Died in 4 BC, and so then Joseph gets visited by this angel again to say, okay, now you can go home. Go back to Israel. Scholars say that they very likely followed on the Via Maris, which was a famous trade road that went from Egypt north along the Mediterranean, and when it got to about Caesarea Philippi, that it headed northeast through the mountains and went by Sepphoris, which was a very famous town that the other son of Herod had been building, which was within walking distance of Nazareth. And then the road went past Nazareth. It would go on all the way to Damascus. It was a very popular road and heavily used. But Joseph and Mary and Joseph got off the road and went into Nazareth. Scholars say that it was actually probably a family compound. Everyone, including Mary and Joseph and Jesus, were now all related in Nazareth. They're all relatives, cousins, aunts and uncles, grandparents, kinds of people, but they all had relationships. Because remember that in the days of Mary and Joseph, first cousins were married with one another in order to preserve the tribe and the purity of what's being inherited. And so Mary and Joseph, with Jesus, settle in to Nazareth, and they get on with the business of being a family, being a holy family, and raising Jesus, which it looks like they did a pretty good job doing that. When I think of Jesus as a little guy, I think of him as one, he's very bright and very inquisitive, and in my imagination, he's a talker. This kid will not be quiet. Talks all the time. Asks you 100 questions. You may have children like that. Talk. Please stop talking to me. Talk, ask questions, why this and why that. But that's how they learn. And I think of Jesus that way. He's curious and he's inquisitive. And so he's constantly asking for information. So they did a good job, though, because by the time Jesus is an adult and starting his public ministry, he's very adept in dealing with crowds. He's very socially informed. He is able to read on some level, and he knows probably a couple of other languages, probably some Greek and some Latin, that he would know that just as being part of the culture in addition to Aramaic. And so they do a good job raising Jesus. And so the Holy Family on this feast is given to us as a model of what it's like to be family. What is it like? How should we be? Remembering what Margaret Mead said about how important the family is, the building block of society. It's important that the families are well-functioning. They have what they need and in order to raise children and then to pass on the resources to the next generation. And so we're called to be like the Holy Family. St. Paul, in the letter to the Colossians, gives us some suggestions for how a holy family would be. They would be compassionate. They would be kind. They'd be humble, gentle, and patient, and bearing with one another, and best of all, forgiving one another. In order to maintain peace in a family, forgiveness has to be at the very heart of their functioning. Everyone makes mistakes. Everybody says things they probably shouldn't have. They don't do what they do, and they do what they shouldn't do, and then don't do what they should do. So it takes, over a period of time, forgiveness. Because the important thing is to maintain that unity, because the family is existing to raise those children. And so if mom and dad are sort of having a tough day, they need to make sure that it doesn't affect the unity of the family. And that they stay true to one another, not in an emotional, romantic sense, but in a situation of honor and duty and faithfulness to maintain that unit, and so that the children can be raised as Jesus was. Towards the end of the second reading in Colossians is my favorite line. I love it because the congregation every year bristles when they hear it. You can just feel the tension. You know what it says. Wives, be subordinate to your husbands. Don't like that. In our culture, that sounds bad. Wives, be subordinate to your husbands. Remember, this is written in a very different culture, very different time. People lived under the law. Under the law, the husband was literally the head of the family, and everyone did what he said. That's just how it was. And so St. Paul is saying, okay, we have this, and wives should, we probably use the word cooperate rather than be subjective, cooperate, get along. And then for the husbands to love their wives, so it's a two-way street. And then in the process, raising the children. St. Paul says, don't be hard on the kids. Give them a break. Don't go at them so much. You're not raising little bits of perfection. You're raising little human beings that need to function in society. And so it's important that they have some edge and some room to grow and make some mistakes, and then seek forgiveness and learn from those experiences. And so on this Feast of the Holy Family, we're reminded that how important that family unit is, whether we're in a family now or we used to be, or we of course have relatives we relate to. It's important that we think of that family as a solid unit that is not ripped apart just for reasons that really are important in the long run. But we're called to maintain that unit and then expand our idea of family to include the church. Include the church here. We're a family. In fact, it's traditional. The church is called Holy Mother Church, because the church is seen as a big family of people who follow Jesus. And then we can expand that concept to include the community in which we live are all members of this communal family. And then national family idea that we're all in this together and we need to support one another and live in peace and harmony. And if we live according to the suggestions of St. Paul and in being kind and humble and gentle and patient and forgiving, we can maintain that unity not only within the family but in the community and also within the nation, that if we follow those virtues, then it helps us all live in peace with one another as we progress on the way to heaven.